Hey everybody, it's Amanda with Faith Grows Deep. I wanted to share a little bit about my testimony. So I've mentioned in a couple of my videos that if you had a testimony you wanted to share or needed prayer requests or anything, you could email me to the email I have in the description. So in that sharing, I just kind of want to do a quick little share. My testimony is actually extremely extensive. So given the overview of it, kind of goes through pretty quick. It's really hard to kind of explain without it taking an hour or so because there's so much involved. It is very extensive to fully grasp, I guess, the full understanding of how that change took place. Because of how that has played out in my life, I'm actually working on writing a book about my testimony. So I currently am probably about, it's kind of hard to give a time frame because my process of writing is praying and worshiping and giving that to God and allowing Him to give me the words through me from my experiences and what has happened to what needs to be shared. This book is not about me sharing myself and getting that attention because I'm not that person. I do not actually like attention, which is why videos can be weird. However, it's a little different talking to the camera than it is talking to a big group of people. I'm very weird talking in front of people, although I can do it. But I don't really care for that direct attention. However, it has been put on my heart and I have been convicted, and it has been reaffirmed several times through different people who didn't even know my story about how I should be writing a book, but they don't know why they got that feeling. And I knew exactly what they were talking about, so I knew what it was, but it is a very long and extensive story, so it's hard to just be like, this is my testimony and this is whatever. But somebody out there needs to read that. I want to say I'm about a third of the way through, but because of the process up to this point, the things that have been shared are things I hadn't even thought about in many, many, many years. And for whatever reason, it had popped up for me to write about. And so it's taking longer than I thought. So even though I want to say it's about a third of the way finished right now, I don't really know because I don't know how much I'm supposed to get into this. I let God lead that for me, and whatever comes out is supposed to be there for whatever reason. But I get in this zone in my mind in the right place, and it's just, this is all for Him and His glory. So I just know it's something that's going to help a lot of people. I don't know who needs it, but I know somebody out there needs it, which is why I've been feeling that conviction several years to get this written. So anyway, the short overview, the best I can, of my testimony. It started long since childhood, basically, but I think just the way I am, I'm the oldest of my siblings, and being somebody who has dealt with a lot of condemnation and a lot of rejection, not in the basic sense, but I mean just feeling unloved and unwanted, and I'm the problem, and I'm why nobody can be happy in their life, and if I just wasn't there, they could actually be happy, or they can actually accomplish the things they want, but I'm the burden. And growing up that way, and growing up in a home that had a lot of incorporation of different abuses, it didn't really lead to a good childhood life for me. I'd gotten baptized when I was 8, thinking God would make everything better, but that's not exactly how that played out. I ended up being a pregnant teen. I had been severely depressed. I was even suicidal at one point. There's a lot involved in that, but as I got older, there were certain points in my life. I hate having to see other people suffer and deal with those things like I had to. So being the oldest, I was always very protective over my siblings with that, the best I could control, or the best that I could try to prevent it. But I'm only one person and I was a kid. So anyway, one of my brothers, I'm 14 years older than him, or was. I don't know how to specify that. But we ended up getting custody of him when he was 13. It was right before his 14th birthday. There were a lot of struggles and a lot of heartbreak going through some of those things that I wasn't even aware of until after I got him and he opened up to me, and it was very heartbreaking. It was an adjustment for our family with things. I knew the way my husband and my kids, the way our life was from how I grew up was kind of a culture shock, given that we went into the military. It's a completely different lifestyle. So I knew there was an adjustment period and stuff. And so we went through things with that. And then, there's still a lot involved in that. I don't know how to go into it, but the gist of things, although I believed God was real, I wasn't living that way. I wasn't raising my kids that way. We weren't really following God, if that makes sense. And you definitely couldn't see that we were believers in my life. It got to a point right before my brother's 17th birthday. It's actually kind of a thing, because I think it was December or January of 2016, found out my uncle, who I was kind of close to, at least growing up. I had very few aunts and uncles I was close to, but kind of grew up with his boys. And when I was younger, and found out he had stage 4 cancer and was only given maybe 6 months left to live. So that Easter, we went up to go see him and came back, and we were kind of in a mindset of trying to prepare ourselves to lose a family member. We were just expecting that to be my uncle. But once we got back, I think it was maybe a month and a half later, maybe 6 weeks, if it was even that, my brother was murdered. And that hit even harder. I know we'd only had him about 3 years, but being the oldest, I was always protective of him as a baby and whatever anyway. But it was like losing my own kid. We lost a child in our home, and it was completely devastating. It completely shattered everything we knew. I don't even know how to really explain that loss. That's partly why I'm working through the book. God gives me those words. So our life is not the same. It's never going to be what it was before, because this was such a traumatic, life-altering situation. But it wasn't just like, oh, he got murdered. I don't mean to downplay anybody being murdered, but this was a brutal, horrible murder. It was kind of on the news. They ended up doing an episode and interviewing us for one of those Joe Kenda American Detective things, right? If you happen to want to see that, it is season 1, episode 7, called I think something like The Face with No Name or something crazy like that. Although even with that, I know it is a show that is about entertaining purposes, and although they have the basics of things, a lot of things I shared in that interview were never mentioned. And I'm actually grateful for that, because that's where my book comes in, because it's more about how God led me through that and everything. So they didn't really use any of that information in there. But it was a pretty devastating situation. A lot of things in that are not all facts. There is missing information in that episode I know about, but the just general overall aspect is pretty much in line. Some of those details, like the fact that they only listed 5, but there was 6 people involved, and how they kind of played certain roles, because again, it's an entertainment type of thing. Some of the way those roles are played out a little bit aren't quite exactly how that happened, but it, again, general overview, right? So that kind of also led me into, okay, they didn't use that. That leaves me to write my testimony without having to fix information or them twisting it because of what God led me into with this. So anyway, horrible, brutal thing, right? And I just, I don't know how to explain this. So it changed things. My natural being wanted revenge. I was angry. I wanted somebody to pay for what they did. And I didn't trust the justice system to do it. It's something I had to fight internally against, because I've always grown up like, I protect my siblings. Nobody's going to hurt them. And if you do, you have me to deal with, kind of thing, right? So it is hard going through that, and that internal battle was very hard and difficult to get through, because not only am I dealing with the grief, but I'm also dealing with what happened, and I was the one taking care of him. I felt responsible. I should have known the signs. I should have seen that these things were red flags. There's, like, again, extensive. There's a lot into it. But as I was going through things, I realized, going through court, the 2 years, all of that stuff going on, how everybody was focused on, this is what you did. You took this from the family. You took this from me. I don't get to have these experiences with him and now. And it's like, I felt like everything was based on us as the individual, of what was taken from us, and nobody seemed to be standing up for what was taken from Andrew, what they took from him, about getting that justice for him. It wasn't about us family, because there was multiple families affected by this. Because the kids involved that did this, I call them kids, they were all 18 to 20 when this happened. Andrew was 16. However, to me, those are still kids. So even though they were of age, those kids' families, because of the choices they made, were also affected by all of this. So it wasn't just about us and what was taken from us and whatever. It was about getting justice for him, for what they did to him, for what he went through. And I didn't feel like anybody was really speaking on that. And the type of person he was, granted, he is not perfect. We all have flaws. But he was a very caring, loving kid. I have even discussed things with him several times, and like, I understand you're trying to help, but you need to be careful. You need to make sure you're judging these situations to keep yourself safe. And you don't want to get wrapped up with the wrong people and blah, 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 just talking about friends. Because, you know, I guess it's not abnormal in our world now, but like some of his friends were doing drugs and some of them were, well, I say drugs. The only thing I was aware of was weed, but I'm like, you have more potential than this. You're a growing kid. You're a smart kid. You know, don't use this as something that's going to ruin your development kind of thing. You know, the parental figure in his life. Anyway, going through those things and telling him, you know, well, that isn't a good thing that they did. And he would always come back, but you don't know what their life was before. What led them to think that this was the only choice they had? And yeah, they made a mistake, but maybe they don't realize that because of their life. And so he was very passive on judging a situation because we grew up knowing some of our reactions to things aren't because it was right. It was just the things we had been around and how we were raised, that was our reaction based on our past. And as kids, you can't control that all the time. So I got where he was coming from with it. I understood what he was saying. But somebody having that view and not passing that kind of judgment on people and being more open to understanding that just because somebody made a choice and did something wrong doesn't necessarily mean that's who they are, or maybe they didn't know they had another choice or whatever because they don't know any different. Like they know it probably isn't good, but maybe they don't even understand in themselves that they felt they had to do this or that this was the only option they had because of all of the stuff ingrained in their childhood growing up. And I get what he was saying, but I kind of feel like that outlook on life and that outlook towards people was something we don't see a lot of in this world. And it's something that was taken from the world that we need to see more often. So I fought against myself to step up to be who he would have been or deal with situation or this situation the way he would have. And we all knew, as horrible as this was, if he actually survived this, he would have forgiven them, all 6 of them. He may not have ever like hung out with them or been friends with them anymore, but he was the kind of person he would have gotten to the point he would have forgiven them. So that kind of started my thing there, to become that person, to be, I can never fully be him, you know, but stepping into that role to show the world something different, which ultimately led me to my relationship with God and following God and working through those pieces to the point that God led me to forgive all of them. It kind of goes beyond just forgiving them. But again, that's for my testimony book. But God changed everything. And it was what happened to my brother that ultimately led me into that. And for the first time, I understood the difference between believing, like what it meant to believe in God and what it meant to walk with God. And I never understood that until this happened. And I know sometimes it takes something big and drastic to wake you up. And I kind of am irritated at myself that it took this to wake me up. We all have that point in our life. And I hope nobody has to go to the point to where I had to go to in order to finally wake up. I hope it doesn't have to be something not devastating. But I think sharing that with everybody and getting this book finished for others out there to help them, whoever it may be, is going to be extremely beneficial in showing how God comes through and how God works in us despite everything. It just takes us being open enough to see it and embrace it and cling to Christ. So anyway, that's just kind of the gist of it. I know this is going way longer than I expected. I figured 10-15 minutes tops, but here we are at 20 minutes. But that's kind of the basis of it. But how he worked beyond that point is a huge part of the book I'm writing too, because it's not just what happened and what led me to God. It's how God used me and worked in my life and other people's lives through me, through that whole process, and how he kind of took over and what that life looks like. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of come on and share. Like I said, it's extensive, so it's not a quick testimony, and that's barely touching the surface. So anyways, I will go ahead and let you go, and I hope you guys have a blessed day. And again, if you have a testimony you'd like to share, it doesn't have to be as tragic as mine. Everybody has a testimony. No matter how important you think it is, your testimony is important. It is going to speak to somebody. It is going to help somebody. So please don't diminish your testimony, whether you were just raised in the church and raised with a Christian family. You speak wonders on what it means to stand strong in the faith. You are an example to people on what that can look like for people who, how do I explain? So for me, I never had that example. I never knew what that looked like. I didn't even know where to start to have that life when my kids were younger. So you are a good example for that and what that looks like and what it can look like. And so please don't diminish that, because a lot of people, if they were like me, don't even know how or what that first step is. However, if you did have something that led you to a breaking point, you finally hit bottom, and then you came to Christ and all of that, you have a good testimony too. That doesn't diminish anything. It might seem like more people come to that, but your story is still important. Your testimony still speaks wonders to others. So anyway, if you would like to share your testimony, I'd love to hear them. If you have any prayer requests, good or bad, praise prayers, I don't know what you call them. But if it's something you're just, praise God, this happened in my life, it is a breakthrough, it is awesome. Those are things to praise God and pray about as well. So good or bad, sad, happy, doesn't matter. Go ahead and email me, and I'd be happy to pray for you guys, and I'd love to hear your testimonies. All right, anyway, you guys have a blessed day. Thank you.